Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this month's webinar for Latinas in Engineering presented by ACE. Thank you, everyone who's been logging in. We'll get started in the next minute. Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Again, thank you all and welcome to ACE's August webinar series. This month's webinar is focused on Latinas in Engineering. Thank you all for joining. For those who are new to ACE, we are a national nonprofit based here in Chicago. Our mission is to positively impact the American workplace by cultivating the pipeline of Latino talent and providing Latino professionals the insight, access, and support to be successful in their careers. If you are not yet a member of our organization, feel free to go on our website, acetonline.org. It is totally free to become a member. I am Maria Velasquez, the Senior Program Coordinator at ACE, based here in Chicago, and I will be your facilitator today for our Latinas in Engineering webinar. But before we get started, I do want to share a few of our upcoming events. September 13, we're going to have a joint event with Hispanic Pro to kick off Hispanic Heritage Month. That will be here in Chicago, Friday, September 13. And I would also like to invite you all to join us for next month's webinar focused on stories of Latinidad in the spirit of Hispanic Heritage Month. And that will be Wednesday, September 25th. The third event that we have coming up in September is our University Leadership Night, hosted also here in Chicago by Blue Cross Blue Shield. This event is open to all university students, primarily focusing on juniors and seniors and those recent grads to really get face time with recruiters and their corporate partners to secure that entry-level or internship opportunity. To find these events and all of the rest of the events coming up, I welcome you all to also go on our website, acetonline.org/events, and all of the events that are upcoming will be there along with registration links. So without further ado, I go ahead and present to you all our two speakers for today. Our first speaker is Lourdes Gonzalez. She is Senior Vice President at Primera Engineers. And our second speaker is Kathia Benitez, Regional Director at Franklin Energy. Both of these women are Mujeres de ACE alumna. So thank you both, Lourdes and Kathia, for joining us today and for being our panelists on our very exciting webinar today.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Alrighty, so with that, we'll go ahead and get it started. Lourdes, if you can start us off by introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about your background with the rest of our attendees today.
Of course, thank you. Yes, I'm Lourdes Gonzalez. I currently work at Primera Engineers. I've been here for almost 18 years. I am a graduate of the University of Illinois in Champaign. My degree is in architecture. I went to university there and also got my master's there. And I started my career as an architect doing historic preservation. So your path is one that takes many twists and turns along the way. After I had my first child, I also switched jobs shortly after that and have been working in engineering firms since that time. I really like the challenge of an engineering focus workforce because you have a much broader view of the building. I still do architecturally related projects, but with an engineering focus. So I have a combination of both. I have had many positions along the way, starting as a starting as a drafter, then becoming a project engineer, project manager, and from there I've really grown into one of the leaders of our firm. I do quite a bit of business development. That is my current focus, is leading the business development efforts for our buildings organization. It's one of our 3 main areas of focus at Primera Engineers. So I work with a lot of clients throughout the region, and really our firm has expanded nationally this year, even more so than previously. So I've started focusing some of my efforts in other areas, including Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. But I work with a lot of public sector clients, private universities, and other private design and construction firms. So I work on a lot of different kinds of projects, whether they be schools, hospitals. We do corporate work, so new office buildings, renovations. And since I'm an overall role for the company, I also work with our transportation engineers, working with not only transportation clients like IDOT and the tollway, but also doing quite a bit of work in the aviation field. So not only at O'Hare, which is starting to undergo a very large $8 billion program for renovation of, well, replacement of one of the terminals and a very large expansion, as well as renovating all of the existing infrastructure that's to remain, including the other 2 terminals. So looking at expanding that focus of our firm, and just really it's about relationships. That's really my primary job, as a relationship engineer, maintaining relationships with our existing clients and serving them well, meeting new clients and talking to them about the services that we can provide to them. I have been active in a number of professional organizations over my years in this industry, including, I think the one where I've had the most impact is the Construction Management Association of America, CMAA, the Chicago chapter. I have been on the executive board there for a number of years, including serving as president back about 7 or 8 years ago. And I continue to be very active on that executive board, serving as the awards chairman currently.
Great, thank you, Lourdes, for sharing. Sorry, were you done or?
No, I'm done. I was going to say more later.
Of course. Kathia, would you go ahead?
Absolutely. So good afternoon, everyone. First and foremost, I'm noticing there's a lot of females on this webinar in this space of STEM engineering, utility space. So it's exciting for me to see the amount of women that have signed up to just hear our stories and also just to learn that this field is expanding and that Latinas are eventually going to be growing in percentages than where we currently are today. A little bit about me. My name is Kathia Benitez, and I currently work for Franklin Energy. Franklin Energy is the 2nd largest implementation contractor in the nation, and we implement and manage energy efficiency programs for utilities, municipalities, and state governments throughout the United States. In my current role as a regional director, I oversee the company's central region, which consists of Indiana, Kentucky, Canada, and Illinois. Most of the utilities I oversee in Illinois are in Chicago. And I'm primarily responsible for leading a team and the energy portfolio administration for large gas and electric utilities in those states, as well as providing subject matter expertise to our commercial and industrial energy efficiency programs as a company as a whole. And what that means is looking at all of the private public sector facilities, be it healthcare, higher education, hospitality, commercial real estate, your large food, grocery, consumers, manufacturing, industrial system. So that's where I bring my expertise to the company. Prior to joining Franklin Energy, I was serving in an array of capacities, but for the most part, my career has been establishing energy management and sustainability programs for commercial industrial facilities, healthcare, higher ed. I've been in this industry now for a little over a decade, and I had some experience with the Department of Energy helping them administer their Better Buildings Initiative, which was a national energy consumption reduction challenge for public and private sectors. So through that experience, I was able to build my social capital and network and kind of understand the array of energy efficiency opportunities that were available for a diverse set of buildings, if you will. And in terms of my career and certifications, I am a certified energy manager, certified energy procurement professional. I am a certified demand side management professional, and I'm currently completing my Master's of Science in Energy Management from New York Institute of Technologies, College of Engineering, Computing Sciences. My background is a little unique, and I'll share more about that later on this webinar. But what does it mean to be in this field of energy management and sustainability for those that are on the call and are not familiar with the space? What we do is we plan, we operate the, from energy production to consumption, be it the gas, electricity, water, how is it produced? Where is it going? How is it distributed through our networks? How do we procure it? What are the costs associated with these, with our utilities? As well as looking at resource conservation, climate protection, and cost savings for organizations at the state level, organization level. So there's a lot of areas that you can touch when it comes to energy management, and your role is to essentially pull in all of those stakeholders within your organization to try to improve the efficiency of your space, to try to find cost reduction opportunities, and help with climate change and kind of reducing our impact to the environmental issues, environmental degradation that we have, that we're currently challenged with. So that's a little bit about me. I also I'm an appointed board director to the Illinois Green Alliance Board, and I'm supporting the organization's goal of incorporating carbon drawdown strategies and trying to incorporate those solutions into all of our communities in the greater Chicago area. And I'm helping the organization by co-chairing the board's Diversity and Inclusion Committee and trying to provide some guidance and alignment and provide accountability to ensuring that everything that we do as an organization and these carbon drawdown strategies are available, equitable, and inclusive to all of our communities. So yeah, that's about me.
All right, thank you both. Thank you for sharing your impressive backgrounds. And with that, I wanted you guys to talk a little bit about your introduction to the field. How did you find this as your career path, and what made you decide to take on these particular roles and this field? And anyone can start.
I'll go ahead and start. I fell into this more because I wanted a more holistic approach to problem solving for projects. I thought I always worked very closely with the engineers in my first role when I was in an architecture firm, and I just like providing a whole solution for a problem. And I think that's where the engineers are really critical to providing a complete solution. So that's kind of how I got started in this variation on my path.
And so for me, it's very unique. I quickly talked a little bit about this earlier, but my career unfolded in the most non-traditional way, if you will. At the time when I was first introduced to plant operations, facilities management, energy management, if you will, I was graduating at the time with a master's degree in behavioral health. And I, at the time, was working as a supervisor for plant operations or facility operations for one of the behavioral health facilities at New York Presbyterian Hospital in New York. And I had supported within this role, I was supporting the corporate administration with compliance issues, environmental issues, preventative maintenance, and that eventually kind of put a spotlight on my work and my effort. And at the time, I had developed some matrices that were required for hospitals to stay open and be certified. There are certain inspections, environment of care inspections that they have to go through. And I created an executive summary of all the requirements and kind of putting together a very succinct report dashboard that all the hospitals could use to kind of demonstrate their compliance to all of those performance requirements. And so that little effort that I had put into my work at that time in that position elevated me to a corporate function, and I had been presented with a corporate opportunity to oversee the energy management portfolio for the entire healthcare corporate system, which was about 15 million square feet of space, managing a utilities budget of over $60 million. And this was my big wow opportunity. And, you know, I was leaving a social sciences field to merge into a completely different space, engineering, energy management, not an area that was familiar to me, but, you know, having that experience within that plant operations position helped me understand the nuts and bolts of what it takes to make sure that the building systems are running as efficient as possible, and that we're finding conservation opportunities wherever they are available. So that kind of leveraged whatever little I did there, kind of put a spotlight on me and positioned me to something more corporate, larger, and my role just kept expanding from that point on. But it took a lot of dedication, a lot of kind of expanding into this engineering role. And the only thing that I do recall when this opportunity was presented to me, the vice president at the time had said, you know, you're in the social sciences field, and your job as a behaviorist is to look at behaviors and try to help individuals kind of change different patterns, try to improve their lives. But typically, you know, behaviors are, you know, individuals are who they are, and we tend to fall back into those behaviors, and rarely do we see a full plan go into effect without any setbacks. And he put that example in place, and he said, now if you were to look at a facility and improve the space or any feature within that space, you're most likely going to see that plan that you've implemented, that solution or that efficiency measure, you're going to see that for its life cycle. And so kind of that scenario that he presented to me was very much more, I would want to see a solution or a plan that I put into place, kind of see its life cycle and make sure that it is having an impact. And to me, that spoke volumes. And so that kind of convinced me to transition out of behavioral health. And not to say that I don't use my degree and what I've learned there in this space. It's very much needed, especially with climate change issues. So now I'm in the process of merging both of my disciplines, behavioral health and energy management.
Awesome, great. Thank you for sharing. And with that, if you guys can go share a challenge that you faced when you were starting off in your career, or something that you're currently navigating through.
Do you want to go ahead, Kathia?
Sure, I can go ahead. So I was very young in my career at the time, and even though I felt I was prepared, I had grit, I was ready for the next big thing, the next big career, you know, taking on a corporate portfolio with significant risks and demands. It came with a lot of obstacles. I was not, you know, my ambition kind of blindsided me to the realities of the world and this industry specifically. This was, when I started, predominantly a white male-dominated workforce. It took immense bravery and courage for me to face every day all the naysayers. She can't do it. She's a woman. She's leading a staff of, you know, 50 men. They're not going to respect her, and they were all white males. So it was this constant, questioning of whether or not I could carry out the task, right? And so for me, I had to learn to kind of quiet down all of the voices and the noise and just stay focused on what I knew I could deliver, building social capital, building their trust, and kind of being vulnerable, right? A lot of it was, this is who I am, this is what I bring to the table. It took a lot of learning and growing for me to prove my ability to deliver. But time and time again, it was, with the spirit of humility and grit, I was able to build that credibility, and my impact and contribution was very much evidenced, and time again through performance. My performance spoke for itself, and eventually all of that just went to, it just muted, it silenced. I do remember this one situation with one of the foremans as I was starting my career. I had to have them all change out their uniforms from just from a personal protective equipment issue. We wanted to make sure that they were wearing the proper attire, they had the right equipment. And I was, again, faced with the discrimination. You're not going to tell me what to wear. Who are you to tell me what to wear? And kind of down talking. So for me, it was, again, working through those challenges of finding my authority through the fact that I was young, I was Latina, I was not an engineer, I was not someone they were familiar with in this space. So a lot of barriers, but again, my performance and grit kind of helped me overcome those issues.
So when I started my career, there were very few women. There were a lot of women in my college program. I think the year I started at school in Champaign, there was a very large influx of women that all just enrolled at the same time. So I had a lot of support of my peers, but there were very few women that were, let's say, a few years ahead of me, even 5 years ahead of me. The numbers of women in architecture and even less in engineering that are 5 to 10 years older than me are incredibly small. So there were not a lot of women mentors that were available to me to really show me how to leverage relationships and leverage opportunities. I was a very hard worker, and I, nose to the grindstone, and I got all my work done, and I was, prompt and on time. But what I certainly missed at the beginning of my career, which, I'm catching up now, but it's certainly would have been easier had I had those relationships with people that had been in the industry a little bit longer, people that could have given me more advice on career opportunities and options for career path. So that I found to be the very biggest challenge. And then my personality is I'm very nice. People say that, but sometimes that's the detriment. And it's hard to kind of, at the time, again, very male centered, especially on the job site. There's a different kind of mood at a construction job site than there is even in an office, even if the same number of men are in the two different situations. So there was always the contractors apologizing for using, not talking nicely in front of the lady at the job site trailer. And I was like, you don't have to apologize. I've heard worse and I've said worse. So just keep going and let's resolve the issue. But it was almost like they certainly didn't treat me the same way they treated the other men on the job site. Sometimes that was an advantage and sometimes it wasn't. So that was certainly a challenge that I had to overcome. And normally the way to overcome that was I had more data. I had more information. I asked questions that were hard to argue against. Just very logical questions, and then they're like, oh, yeah, okay. So that's some of the challenges I faced.
Okay, and I think that's a perfect segue into the next question, which is if you could share something, some advice to your younger self. And I know we have students that are also signed up for this webinar that are currently in school for engineering. So what's some advice that you both wish you've heard or had when you were younger in your careers? And either
Well,
one can
Yeah,
start.
yeah, and I echo some of the things that Lourdes just shared with everyone. I think the most valuable advice that I can impart on anyone is to always pursue your passions, find mentors that can cultivate that passion, right? Always find you're only as strong as your networks, right? So I had key individuals that made sure my voice was heard, my opinion was honored, that I was given authority over certain decisions. I took a lot of chances, but I also had I had sponsors that believed in me, that were several levels up in terms of hierarchy, that knew what I was doing. I was plugged in. I was constantly finding and seeking out those sponsors and mentors. And sponsors, it's very different from a mentor, right? Because they're outside. They're not checking in with you as often as a mentor, but they are kind of sitting on the sidelines watching and kind of rooting for you without you even knowing. And when the doors are closed and a position is being talked about, they're typically going to discuss high performers. And so I made sure I always had a sponsor somewhere up on that hierarchy that knew what I was doing. That I would use as a sounding board to make sure that the decisions I was thinking about, or kind of whatever process I was thinking of implementing, that I was somewhat sound checked. And I've learned that change is inevitable, right? You're going to need to transition. You're going to be confronted with uncharted territories. You're going to need to experience new opportunities that are going to ask you to grow and expand. Throughout my career, there are things that I still work through. I still have my things professionally that I'm always working on to improve. And the more that you're presented opportunity to expand and grow into bigger roles, you're going to be asked to do things that you may not be comfortable with. I'm an introvert, and so having to come out and be more extroverted and managing a team of now almost 150, it's going to require a lot of you. And so just keep that in mind. But to your question, Maria, if I were to talk to myself, back in my sophomore year in high school, I would definitely, I didn't have the greatest guidance counselor. I mean, I grew up in a single family home. Money was not, it was something that we struggled with as a family. And I didn't have, the right mentors or advisors to say, hey, have you explored these career opportunities, these career options? And my guidance counselor, she really wasn't the best. She knew my situation and basically made a decision for me and said, your best chances are to go to community college and just kind of get your associate's liberal arts degree and figure it out from there. I think if I were to go back in time, I would definitely, speak to myself and say, self, go find someone that is looking out for your best interests, and, look for someone that you aspire to be, and, try to get their advice and counsel. Eventually, I found the right people. Thankfully, not too late that I was put back on the right path.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, Kathia, because my guidance counselor, even though I was pretty, luckily, I was pretty set on wanting to go to architecture school. Now, I still don't know quite how I came to that realization, other than I really liked art and I really liked math, but I didn't want to do them one or the other. I wanted to do a combination. But my guidance counselor, even though I told her very clearly that I wanted to be an architect, she suggested that I go to a liberal arts school, small liberal arts school, Knox College in particular, because that would be a good foundation. And I was like, you have no idea what it takes to be an architect. And why are you suggesting I veer so far from the path? So I was fortunate in that I had enough self-confidence at that point, even though I was very, very kind of quiet at that point in my life. Not so much anymore. That I was able to say, no, that's not the path for me. I want to go to an architecture program. And being the first one in my family to really go to even in my extended family, the first one to go to college outside of not live at home, that was a big deal. So convincing my parents that I could travel the 150 miles to Champaign, that was a big conversation in our family. So, but I convinced them, and it was definitely the right path for me. I would say, so I talked a little bit about finding mentors and sponsors. I think that's so important. But I think even more than that is creating a network of people. So it's great to network with your peers, and that's always helpful because then there's a shared camaraderie there in terms of what you're going through and that current phase. But it's very important to find people that are in the next phase above you or even beyond that, because that is where you're going to get the most benefit. So joining a professional organization, volunteering for a committee, serving on the committee. So that's where you're going to meet a lot of different people that are in different stages of their career. And I think it's very, very important to create a broader network than just of your peers. So I found amazing ability to create a network because of our shared experience if you're on a professional organization. And don't always necessarily just join the young professionals committee. Try to branch out and look at different committees, things that you're passionate about, and try to join those committees as well, because you'll have a broader base of people to meet.
No, thank you both. Some of the advice that you both share, I know can be transferred to also folks that are already in the industry, but that was going to be my next question. If there's any different tidbits that you can advise to women who are already in the field with a few years of experience and are trying to leverage their experience to get that promotion or maybe to do a lateral move, what's some advice that you can share with other Latinas in the field that are a little bit more established?
I think having sorry, go ahead, Lourdes.
No, you go ahead, Kathia.
I was just going to say, for me, it's, I owe my success in part to those sponsor relationships that I have cultivated over time. And like Lourdes said, you have to stay plugged in. You're at some point, you're going to be asked to give back, and giving back may come at no reward, not in a financial gain, not in at the moment, you may not see it. It may not come with a title change, but over time, you're building your portfolio, you're building your expertise, you're building your network, and you're going to be plugged into different opportunities that you would not have otherwise had an opportunity to explore had you not given that time and dedicated some of, an effort into cultivating, that camaraderie, that community, the sense of community within those affiliations or trade organizations. There were a ton of Hispanic, Latino, and energy or engineering organizations that you can be a part of, either become an auxiliary board member or try to become a board member or become a volunteer within some of the structured committees within those organizations. I mean, those are going to open up significant doors and add value. Speak up if you feel like there's an area that you would like to explore. Present that opportunity. You never know where, what direction it will take.
And I think even within our own neighborhoods, there's important relationships that can occur even within your own community as you're volunteering and giving back. You never know who you're going to meet and how they're connected to someone. So, you know, if you're in a phase of life where your family and your children are taking, you know, a lot of your focus, don't think any less of those opportunities, because sometimes those opportunities also can provide benefit to your career. And the other thing I would say is, if you have an opportunity to do the Mujeres de Hace program, both Kathia and I are alumni, and it's an amazing program. I think it instills such a enthusiasm and just really helps you strategize. And it's an amazing program. So certainly look into that if you haven't already done that program or looked at that program.
Thank you, Lourdes. And going off of that, what are other resources that you could provide to all the folks joining us today in terms of leadership programs? I know you mentioned Mujeres de Hace, but maybe organizations where folks can volunteer or serve on auxiliary boards, or any organizations that you are involved that have benefited your career or broadened your experience.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the organizations that I've been involved in outside of CMAA is SHIP. It's the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. There's Arquitectos, that's a more architecture focused group. Kathia encompasses both design and construction professionals. That's also a great organization. Of course, I'm sure Kathia is going to talk about Illinois Green Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
But I think just look at some of the opportunities within your own career field. You know, there's IEEE. I mean, each engineering society has their own organization, especially in Chicago chapters, but in all of the major cities, and many of them have a diversity initiative. So if that's the space that you feel comfortable in, look at volunteering in those areas. Or if you're passionate about students or membership, volunteer to help put on a regional conference or a local conference. There's a lot of people that you meet that way. There's really so many opportunities to meet folks within an industry.
Absolutely. And then I've been in the energy management space for a while now, and some of the tools that I've picked up over time has been through just partner affiliations. You know, Energy Star, the Environmental Protection Agency's Energy Star website, you know, they offer a ton of training materials, webinars, all for free. You know, your cheat sheets on how to implement, how to even start an energy management program. Look at best practices that already exist if you're looking at exploring energy efficiency within your roles. The Department of Energy Better Buildings Initiative, they have a ton of steering committees for all sectors. So depending on, you know, what space you're in, you know, if you're in hospitality and you're looking at, you know, some engineering improvements or solutions, the Better Buildings Initiatives has an umbrella, a subset under the umbrella. It's called the Better Buildings Alliance. You can support those committees. You can offer to support those committees. You can review specification sheets. You can help review requests for proposals. There are a number of opportunities in which you can offer your expertise to support and build the kind of like the horizon for this industry. Other organizations, the Association of Energy Engineers, that's where I've gotten most of my certifications from. Very low cost, and most of the time they've all been sponsored through the organizations that I've worked with, the AEE, and this is a national organization. They offer great programs, webinars, materials, resources. The United States Green Building Council, right? Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design is such a huge, it's kind of our national standard for green and sustainable building, and you can get a ton of certifications through that program itself. They have annual conferences, they have chapter committees, they have chapter boards. Like I mentioned earlier, I serve on the Illinois Green Alliance board. There are a number of organizations that you can get plugged in, and all the organizations I've just mentioned and government affiliations, obviously these aren't specific to Latinos, but our voice needs to be at the table. We need to be heard and we need to be seen, and why not explore those avenues?
Fantastic. Thank you both. That's the end of our webinar, and now I want to open it up to any final thoughts that any of you want to share, or any final comments that you want to add before we go ahead and open it for Q&A. And while both of you respond to this question, for all the attendees, there's a chat box on the bottom. If you can submit any questions that you may have there, I will read them out loud for our speakers today.
Well, Maria, we talked about 8 trends, some trends that we might see in the next 5 years. I don't know if we wanted to talk about that in terms of, I think one of the, most, I think, at least in my experience, the area of resiliency is something that is happening more and more as we see the hurricane Dorian headed to potentially Florida or Georgia. How do we prepare for these events that we feel are coming more frequent and more intense? So the area of resiliency, I think, is an area of study that has a lot of traction at the moment. And the other trend that I really see is how do we incorporate all the advanced computing and artificial intelligence as part of our modeling of solutions, modeling of engineering solutions, and how that is becoming more really integrated into an engineering solution. So we're doing Revit modeling and 3D modeling and clash detection, but it's become even much further than that in terms of layering operational efficiency and how it really runs from the life cycle of a project, from its first concept all the way through operations, maintenance, and long-term work within a building, or even in an infrastructure system, whether it's gas piping or electrical duct bank. Kathia, well, I'm sure we'll have a lot more because that's what Franklin's focused on. So
Absolutely. So I will call everyone's attention to Project Drawdown. Project Drawdown was it's the result of a number of scientists, engineers, forward thinkers, innovators coming up with top 80 solutions that if they were all implemented, they would help reduce atmospheric CO2 emissions, and we would help kind of combat climate change. All of these solutions, for the most part, there's a ton of renewable energy, nuclear, geothermal. You're looking at, district heating. You're looking at lighting systems, water savings, landfill issues, transportation infrastructure, you name it. It's a full array of strategies that, if as a nation, as a world, if we want to save our world, we're going to have to start exploring these areas. And so that would be my only tidbit for you all as we're looking towards a net zero building infrastructure, looking at existing, building portfolios and retrofitting them so that they're as robust and efficient as possible, and they're not consuming, natural resources as much as they are today. So that's my plug.
Awesome. So a question that we got is, how are you personally championing diversity within your fields, and particularly your companies, to bring more Latinos, specifically Latinas, into the industry?
Well, I guess I will say for Franklin Energy, I will say I'm probably one of the first Latinas on their leadership team. And I do my best to, I also serve on the Mujeres de ACE Chicago board, and I'm always trying to plug in, women that I'm meeting through, these cohorts, women in my network, to try to kind of bring their expertise to positions that may be open and available to our, within our organization. I'm also partnered with our diversity and inclusion committee efforts here within Franklin, and trying to inform our pillars and what does diversity look like from inside and outside, as well as, looking at engaging, diverse suppliers, diverse businesses to support our efforts with our utility contracts. I know Primera is a diverse engineering firm, and we partner with them and other firms alike, as well as, other offerings like marketing, or outreach, contractors that are of diverse and have certain diversity certifications. We try to partner with them and leverage their expertise. So we're always trying to find ways to leverage those opportunities wherever we can, internal and as well as our partners.
So Primera, we're not of the scale of Franklin, but locally, and actually at all of our offices, we have a very large focus on giving back to our communities, and our focus is particularly centered around looking at promoting girls for STEM and STEAM programs. So STEM education, and particularly women. So we look to support events that are that fit that category. We have been partnered with Madero School in Pilsen for many years. We actually helped design the school, and so since we were the engineers and architects of record on that school, one of the teachers, when the school first opened up, reached out to us and said, "Hey, I have this science class. I'd like to bring the students in for them to hear about jobs in careers in engineering." And so we've partnered with them for over 25 years, and they has a group 4 times a year that come to our office, and we spend the whole day. We do different engineering activities. We've done little wind turbines. We've done car races with cars made out of candy, and all sorts of different activities with them. But really talking to them about the importance of staying in school, going to college, careers in engineering, what opportunities they had, the paths that we all took to get to where we are today, as everyone's story is a little different. So that's been a tremendous opportunity to really share with the community and really encourage Latino students to look at engineering fields as their career path. And then I'm also on a nonprofit board, UCAN, which is a social service agency. And for a long time, I was the only Latina on the board, but they serve African American and Latino children and families. And so I've been a very strong advocate for diversifying our board as well, and trying to give opportunities to really have other people serve on a corporate board. That's an important next step as you grow, as you get to a certain career point. Having those opportunities and having the Latino voices on different corporate boards is really important, because that's where a lot of the decisions are made. And so giving people the opportunity to serve on these boards is very important.
Great. A final question that we have is, what do you personally think is the biggest roadblock currently that is avoiding the number of Latinas to grow within the engineering fields? And what are your thoughts on changing that?
Do you want to take that, Lourdes?
Yeah,
It's a loaded question.
it is a bit of a loaded question, but I think that's why I think at Primera we've really focused on high schoolers and as early in high school as we can to talk to them about the cool things that engineers are doing so that they even look at that as a career option.
Mhm.
It's a well-paying field, and it is a field that certainly has a broad base of opportunities in many different areas. So it's not geographically centered in only a few spots in the country. I think there's a lot more flexibility in the workplace. Engineering firms are very typically engineers are a very conservative bunch, but I think they have started to see the light, and there's a lot more flexibility in working and working hours and working remotely. And I think that is a big um, problem, not just in engineering, but in many fields, but particularly one where there's a lot of upfront work required to get PE license if you're going in that path. Um, there's advanced schooling required. It's not necessarily a super easy path, but it is very rewarding and can provide great opportunities for people. So I think you need to get to people early and show them the benefits of becoming an engineer, and all the different paths that those engineers can take.
Absolutely. I think, students need to see themselves represented on, in these positions to know that it is possible. And just knowing, our stories are very unique. My story is definitely very different. It wasn't a straight path to this career. But eventually, with guidance and support, I got here. And it's been a very rewarding career journey for me. And now I make it a point to, to speak on STEM panels, right, in high schools and share my story and share my challenges and expose them to some of the truths that, they may not have any idea, in terms of how to even start. What does it mean? What career paths are available for me if I do decide to become an engineer? There's an array of things that you can do.
Right, and I'll just add to that, Kathia and Lourdes. ASE puts on together an annual STEM conference here in Chicago, New York, and Houston. Also, just as an FYI for all of the folks listening, if you have students that are in high school that would benefit from this, make sure to email me and let us know, and we can also include them in that, because I think, like both of you mentioned, it's very important that our students know of these opportunities early on and can see themselves in these fields and can aspire to be an engineer and various other fields within STEM. So with that, if there's any final thoughts from any of you, we can go ahead and conclude the webinar. We didn't receive any more questions.
I would just say thank you to everybody for listening in, and I hope that we've inspired you or given you some tips and tricks that will be helpful in your career.
Absolutely, and feel free to connect on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to grow my network and share, my other network with you all, and any resources I may have. If I have them, I will provide them.
Yes, I agree.
Awesome. Thank you both. Thank you so much for joining today, Kathia and Lourdes, and thank you everyone who joined live today. And then just so everybody knows, this presentation will be emailed to all of you, so you'll have to reference and share. And then the last plugin is for ASE. These are all our social media channels. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Please be sure to follow us and stay connected. Like I mentioned earlier, our next webinar is September 25th, and it's called Stories of Latinidad, where we're going to have an array of Latinos from a multi-generational perspective sharing their stories of being Latinos in their different fields. Again, thank you both, and thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.